The Compass and the Stone, Chapter 1. My life had always been guided by logic and reason. As a retired accountant, I lived by numbers, by order, by things that made sense. At 61, my days were comfortably predictable. Morning coffee on the porch, tending my small garden, volunteering at the local library, evenings spent reading or with my cat, Bartholomew. I was a woman of routine, of quiet certainties. But lately, my predictable world had begun to feel unsettled. It started subtly, a strange pull, a persistent feeling of being drawn towards something I couldn't name. It was like a quiet hum beneath the surface of my everyday life, a sense that there was something I needed to find, somewhere I needed to go. It was illogical, unsettling, and completely unlike me. Then came the dreams. Not vivid, dramatic dreams, but recurring images. A winding road I didn't recognize, bordered by tall, whispering trees, the smell of salt air and pine. And always a stone. Not just any stone, but a specific one. Gray and smooth, marked with a swirl pattern that seemed to move if I looked too closely. The dreams were peaceful, but they left me with a profound sense of longing, a feeling that something important was waiting for me at the end of that road, where the stone lay. I dismissed it at first. Stress, maybe. Too much quiet time on my hands. But the feeling, the dreams, they persisted, growing stronger, more insistent, like a gentle hand guiding me. One afternoon, while browsing in a small antique shop in a neighboring town, a shop I had never been to before but felt compelled to enter, my eyes were drawn to a small tarnished brass compass in a display case. It was old, its glass scratched, but it felt significant. I picked it up, and as I held it, a wave of that strange feeling washed over me, stronger than ever before. It was connected. This compass was connected to the road in my dreams, to the stone. It made no logical sense. I knew nothing about compasses, had no particular interest in antique navigation tools. Yet, holding this object, I felt a pull, a direction, northeast. The needle, even slightly off-kilter, consistently pointed northeast. I bought the compass. The shop owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled as she wrapped it. "Seems like that one was waiting for you," she said, her voice soft. I didn't know what to say. Waiting for me? It sounded like something out of a fairy tale. But holding the compass, the feeling of being drawn, of needing to go somewhere, intensified. Northeast. Over the next few weeks, the pull grew stronger. The dreams became more detailed, showing glimpses of a coastline, rough and rocky, the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The stone in the dreams was always there, nestled amongst smaller rocks near the edge of the water. I pulled out a map. Northeast of my town was the coast, a specific stretch of coastline known for its rugged beauty and hidden coves. Could the winding road lead there? Could the stone be waiting for me on that shore? My logical mind screamed at me. This was ridiculous. Following dreams and feelings and an old compass? It was irrational, perhaps a sign that I was losing my grip. But the intuition was powerful, a force that resonated deep within me, a certainty that I was meant to go. I didn't tell anyone about the dreams, the feeling, the compass. How could I explain it? They would think I was losing my mind. I started planning, secretly, looking at maps, researching towns along that stretch of coastline. The winding road in my dreams, it felt specific, leading away from a small cluster of buildings towards the sea. One evening, while searching online for images of that coastline, I stumbled upon a photograph. It showed a winding road bordered by tall pine trees, leading towards a rocky shore. It was the road from my dreams. My breath hitched. It existed. This wasn't just a figment of my imagination. The photograph was part of a small historical society website for a tiny coastal town called Oakhaven. Oakhaven. The name resonated with a strange familiarity, though I had no conscious memory of it. Was this a coincidence, or was it the first step on the road my intuition was guiding me towards? I decided to go. I packed a small bag, told my children I was taking a short, impromptu vacation to the coast, a break from routine. I didn't mention Oakhaven, or the dreams, or the compass that pointed northeast. Driving northeast, following the direction of the compass, felt both unsettling and exhilarating. As I got closer to the coast, the landscape began to change. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of pine and salt. And then I saw it. The winding road, just like in my dreams, bordered by tall, whispering trees, leading towards the sea. I turned onto the road, my heart pounding. It felt like I was driving into a dream, into a part of myself I didn't know existed. Chapter 2. Oakhaven was a small, picturesque coastal town, the kind that time seemed to have forgotten. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, weathered cottages clung to the hillside, and the air was thick with the scent of salt and brine. It was beautiful, peaceful, and felt strangely familiar, like a place I had visited long ago, though I knew I hadn't. I checked into a small inn overlooking the harbor. The owner, a friendly, talkative woman named Clara, immediately made me feel welcome. I didn't mention the compass, the dreams, or the feeling of being drawn to this place. I just said I was looking for a quiet getaway by the sea. The next morning, I set out to explore. I walked along the harbor, watched the fishermen mending their nets, breathed in the crisp salt air. But the pull, the intuition was still there, directing me towards the rocky coastline I had seen in my dreams. I found the path leading out of town, a narrow, winding trail that followed the edge of the cliffs. It felt like the continuation of the road from my dreams, leading towards the sea, towards the stone. I walked for a long time, the sound of the waves growing louder as I got further from the town. The coastline here was wild and untamed, a dramatic landscape of jagged rocks and hidden coves. I felt a sense of anticipation building within me, a feeling that I was getting closer to something important. And then I saw it. A small cove, sheltered by rocky outcrops, and nestled amongst the rocks near the edge of the water, a stone. Gray, smooth, marked with a swirl pattern, the stone from my dreams. My breath caught in my throat. It was real. The road, the coast, the stone. They weren't just products of my subconscious. They were here, waiting. I walked towards the stone, my steps hesitant. As I got closer, I noticed something else. Etched into the stone, faintly, almost imperceptibly, were initials. Two sets of initials, intertwined. A.M. and L.V. A.M. L.V. They meant nothing to me. Were they carved recently? Or were they old, weathered by years of sea and wind? As I ran my fingers over the etched initials, a new wave of feeling washed over me, a profound sense of sadness, of longing, and a strange, almost visceral connection to this place, to this stone, to the unknown initials etched upon it. This wasn't about a dream or an intuition anymore. This was real. There was a story here, a history I was somehow connected to. I spent the rest of the day in the cove, sitting by the stone, watching the waves, trying to make sense of it all. Who were AM and LV? What was their connection to this place? And why was I drawn here? Back at the inn that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the stone, the initials. I felt a strong need to find out more. I started researching the history of Oakhaven, looking for any stories or legends connected to that particular cove, to people with those initials. I found articles about the town's founding, its fishing industry, its quiet history, but nothing about AM or LV, nothing about the cove being a place of particular significance. The next day, I returned to the Historical Society website, the one where I had found the photograph of the winding road. I looked through their archives, searching for anything related to my initials, to the cove, to the time period when the initials might have been carved. It was a tedious process, going through old documents and photographs. Hours passed, and I found nothing that seemed relevant. Just as I was about to give up for the day, something caught my eye. An old newspaper article, dated 1962. The headline was small, tucked away on an inner page. Tragedy at Black Rock Cove. Black Rock Cove. Was that the name of the cove with the stone? I clicked on the article, my heart pounding. It told the story of a small boating accident. Two young people, a young man and a young woman, caught in a sudden storm. Their boat capsized. The young man was rescued, but the young woman was lost to the sea. The names. The young man was Arthur Miller, AM. The young woman was Lillian Vance, LV. Arthur Miller, Lillian Vance, AM and LV. The initials on the stone. Black Rock Cove, the cove with the stone. My breath hitched again, a cold wave washing over me. A tragic accident. Two young lovers, their lives tragically cut short. And I was drawn to the place where it happened, to the stone they had perhaps marked with their initials. A silent testament to their love. But why? Why was I, a woman from a different town with no apparent connection to Oakhaven or the Miller and Vance families, drawn to this place, to this tragic story? Chapter 3. The revelation of the story behind the initials on the stone left me with a profound sense of sadness and a deeper layer of mystery. Arthur Miller and Lillian Vance, two young lives, lost to the sea, their initials etched into a stone in a hidden cove, a silent monument to their love and their tragedy. And I, a complete stranger, was drawn to this place, guided by dreams and intuition, to uncover their story. It felt like more than just a coincidence. It felt fated, as if Arthur and Lillian, or some force connected to their story, were reaching out across the decades, guiding me to their forgotten memorial. I spent more time in Oakhaven, delving into the history of the Miller and Vance families. I learned that the Millers had been a prominent fishing family in the town, known for their strength and resilience. The Vances were newer to the area, quieter. Arthur and Lillian had been young lovers, planning a future together, a future tragically cut short. I visited the Oakhaven cemetery. I found the Miller family plot, saw the headstone for Arthur Miller, born 1938, died 1962. Lillian Vance's name was not there. Her body was never recovered from the sea. A small memorial plaque in the cemetery commemorated her, listing her name and the date of the tragedy. I felt an overwhelming sense of empathy for these two young people, for the love they lost, for the lives they didn't get to live. And the feeling of connection to them, to their story, only grew stronger. But the question remained, why me? What was my connection to Arthur and Lillian? I knew of no ancestors from Oakhaven, no family ties to the Miller or Vance families. My family history, as far as I knew, was rooted in the town where I grew up. I decided to try a more direct approach. I reached out to the Oakhaven Historical Society again, this time explaining more about my discovery of the stone and the initials, and my feeling of a strange connection to the story of Arthur and Lillian. I asked if there were any living descendants of the Miller or Vance families who might be willing to talk to me. The head of the Historical Society, a kind older gentleman named Mr. Peterson, was intrigued by my story. He knew the history of Arthur and Lillian, a tragic local tale. He said the Miller family still had roots in Oakhaven, though many had moved away over the years. The Vance family, he believed, had left the area entirely after the tragedy. He offered to put me in touch with a distant cousin of Arthur Miller's, a woman named Margaret who still lived in Oakhaven and was knowledgeable about the family history. Meeting Margaret Miller was another step in this extraordinary journey. She was in her late 70s, with a sharp mind and a warm smile. She remembered Arthur, though he was older than her. The accident had been a devastating blow to the Miller family, she said. Arthur was well loved, full of promise. I told her about the stone, the initials, the dreams that had led me to Oakhaven. Margaret listened with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. The stone, she mused. Black Rock Cove. Arthur and Lillian spent a lot of time there. It was their special place. They must have carved their initials there. But why was I drawn here, Margaret? I asked, my voice filled with frustration and wonder. Why me? I have no connection to Oakhaven, to your family, to Lillian's family. Margaret looked at me thoughtfully for a moment. You said your last name is Davison? Yes, I replied. And your mother's maiden name? Henderson, I said. Margaret was quiet for a moment, a frown creasing her brow. Henderson, she repeated softly. That name, it rings a bell. From a long time ago. She got up and went to a bookshelf, pulling down an old leather-bound photo album. She brought it back to the table and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with old black and white photographs. She flipped through them, her finger tracing faces, names. Ah, here it is, she said, pointing to a photograph of a young woman smiling shyly at the camera. This was Lillian Vance. Beautiful girl. I looked at the photo. Lillian, the young woman lost to the sea. Margaret turned to the next page. Another photo, a group of young people laughing on a beach. And this, she said, pointing to a young man in the foreground, his arm around Lillian, is Arthur, my cousin. And this young woman here, she pointed to a woman standing next to Lillian, her arm linked through hers. This was Clara Henderson, Lillian's best friend. Clara Henderson. My mother. My breath hitched. My mother, Clara Henderson. Best friends with Lillian Vance, the woman lost in the boating accident. Chapter 4. My mother, Clara Henderson. Lillian Vance's best friend. The piece of the puzzle that had been missing. The connection that explained the inexplicable pull. The dreams. The fated journey to Oakhaven. My mother knew Lillian. They were close, and something about Lillian's story, her tragic death, had resonated through the generations, a silent echo that had reached me decades later. I had never known my mother had a best friend named Lillian Vance who died in a boating accident. My mother rarely spoke about her youth, particularly about her friendships from that time. She was a private woman, and her past had always felt a little veiled to me. I left Oakhaven with a profound sense of understanding, but also a new layer of questions. What was my mother's connection to Lillian and Arthur? Did she know about their love, their plans? How did Lillian's death impact her? Why had she never spoken of it? Back home, I started looking through my mother's old belongings, the things I had kept after she passed away years ago. I found old photo albums, boxes of letters, mementos from her life. I was looking for any sign of Lillian Vance, any confirmation of the depth of their friendship, any hint of the impact of her death. It took time going through everything meticulously, but eventually I found a small, hidden box tucked away in the back of her closet. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were a few dried flowers, a faded dance card, and a small bundle of letters tied with a thin blue ribbon. The letters were addressed to my mother in an elegant handwriting I now recognized from the photo album Margaret showed me, Lillian Vance's handwriting. The letters were filled with the intimate details of a close friendship, shared secrets, hopes and dreams for the future, plans for dates and outings, and in the later letters, a growing excitement about Arthur Miller. Lillian wrote about their love, their plans to marry, their dreams of building a life together in Oakhaven. She mentioned their special place, a cove by the sea, where they had carved their initials into a stone. Black Rock Cove. My heart ached as I read her words, knowing the tragic end to her story, to their love. Her dreams, so vibrant on the page, were never realized. In the last letter, dated just a week before the accident, Lillian wrote about my mother planning to visit Oakhaven soon. She was excited to introduce my mother to Arthur, to show her their special cove, but the visit never happened. There was a final letter in the bundle, not from Lillian, but from Arthur Miller's mother, written to my mother shortly after the accident. It was a letter filled with grief and sorrow, detailing the terrible events of that day, the loss of both Arthur and Lillian. She wrote that Arthur never recovered from being pulled from the water and passed away a few days later from complications. Arthur's mother thanked my mother for being such a good friend to Lillian and expressed her deepest condolences for her loss. My mother must have been devastated. Losing her best friend so suddenly, so tragically, it explained the quiet sadness that sometimes seemed to cloud her eyes, the reluctance to speak about her youth. It was a wound that never fully healed, a grief she carried silently throughout her life. The dreams, the intuition, the pull to Oakhaven, it all made sense now. It wasn't just a random mystical experience. It was a connection to my mother's unspoken grief, to the story of her lost best friend, a story that needed to be acknowledged, to be brought into the light after decades of silence. I realized that my mother's spirit, or perhaps just the lingering energy of her unspoken sorrow and Lillian's tragic story, had somehow guided me, her daughter, to the place where her best friend's memory was etched in stone, to the story that had shaped a part of her life and unknowingly mine. Chapter 5. Understanding the connection to my mother and her lost best friend Lillian brought a profound sense of peace and clarity. The unsettling feeling, the recurring dreams, the inexplicable pull to Oakhaven. It wasn't a sign of losing my mind, but a thread of destiny, a call from the past, guiding me to a story that needed to be heard, a memory that needed to be honored. I returned to Oakhaven, this time not as a stranger following an intuition, but as the daughter of Lillian's best friend, connected to the town and its history through the bonds of a friendship that transcended time. I spent more time with Margaret Miller, sharing the letters from my mother's box, piecing together the full story of Arthur and Lillian's love and their tragic end, seen through the eyes of their friends and families. We visited Black Rock Cove again, the stone with the initials, a tangible link to their story. It was no longer just a place of tragedy, but a place of remembrance, of enduring love, a quiet testament to lives cut short but not forgotten. I brought flowers, a small tribute from my mother, who never had the chance to say goodbye. I also connected with the remaining members of the Vance family, distant cousins of Lillian's. They were surprised to hear from me, intrigued by my story, and touched to know that Lillian's memory was still held dear, not just in Oakhaven, but by the daughter of her best friend. We shared stories about Lillian, painting a fuller picture of the vibrant young woman she was, the woman my mother loved. My journey to Oakhaven, guided by intuition and a compass that pointed northeast, had led me to a hidden chapter of my mother's life, to the story of a tragic love and a lost friendship, and to a deeper understanding of the quiet grief she had carried. It felt like I had fulfilled a silent, unspoken wish of hers, acknowledging the memory of her best friend, bringing her story into the light after decades of being buried by sorrow and the passage of time. The strange feeling that had led me to Oakhaven, the dreams of the winding road and the stone, the purchase of the compass, they were no longer inexplicable occurrences, but threads in a tapestry woven by fate, by the enduring power of human connection, and perhaps by the lingering energy of love and loss. My logical mind, the one that once dismissed anything that couldn't be explained by numbers and reason, had expanded. I had learned to trust my intuition, to follow the subtle nudges of the universe, to believe that some connections are simply meant to be, guiding us towards truths that lie beyond the realm of logic. The compass I bought in the antique shop sat on my desk, no longer just a curiosity, but a symbol of the journey I had taken, the intuition I had followed, and the hidden history it had led me to uncover. It pointed northeast, a reminder of the winding road to Oakhaven, to the stone, to the story of Arthur and Lillian, and to the enduring echo of my mother's lost friendship. My life, once comfortably predictable, was now infused with a new layer of depth and wonder. I had discovered a hidden connection to my mother's past, honored the memory of her best friend, and learned to embrace the mysteries of intuition and destiny. The stone in the cove was no longer just a marker in a dream, but a tangible link to a story that had found its way to me. A testament to the fact that some echoes from the past are meant to be heard, guiding us towards understanding, healing, and the extraordinary connections that shape our lives in ways we never could have imagined.